And we're live. Hey guys, welcome back to the 21 days of lockdown on the Map Round show. Apparently, the whole country is about to go into some serious lockdown mode because of this coronavirus situation and pandemic. And with me on the line is Kathy Mann. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
No, Maverick, no. That's definitely not the way we welcome you. It was like one person clapping. So Kathy, actually, we're not too far away from each other. It's just that we can't actually be in the same studio. So thanks for making the time and accommodating us on Zoom today. So you're an author of two books. One is Harnessing Stress, and the other one is Avoiding Burnout. And I think these are some pretty relevant discussions right now. And you were recounting to me where this all kind of began in terms of, your own personal journey. So why don't you kick us off from the beginning? Where did the spark from, for these two books come from in your own personal kind of journey?
Okay, well, I had a corporate background in IT, and then I joined the family business wanting an opportunity to know whether I had what it took to run a business. And I worked in the business for about 5 years, and it was really not my passion, and it pretty much broke me. The stress of being in that business completely wrecked my health. So it triggered a complete burnout, which caused an autoimmune disease. So that once you have an autoimmune disease, you can't undo it. It's there for life. And it brought my health to such a standstill that it took about 3 years to get back to be able to work a full day. So because the health collapse was so catastrophic, I obviously, you search for some meaning and try to understand what happened. And if this happened to me, then it's happening to other people. And how can I use this adversity to really help people?
Yeah, and I suppose.
So I think.
Go ahead, and you think?
Yeah, I think the journey started with writing my book, Avoiding Burnout. So that was really a method of trying to understand and unpack the events that led to such a collapse. So that I could share with others, this is how my life looked. And if you see any common elements, you can still change the trajectory of your life and not go quite far down that rabbit hole as I did. So that was really the intention behind the first book.
And tell us a little bit more about what did your life look like, and how did you land up in that kind of situation? Because I think, from my own personal experience, especially towards the end of last year, I just I hit it. I didn't have a day or really any kind of substantial break whatsoever. For the better part of a year, and towards the end of last year, I could be sitting in boardrooms and just not feeling myself at all, spaced out, not really knowing what functioning, but not really, it was just like a super weird position to be in. And I think that probably manifests in everybody else's lives in their own different ways. But what were the events that kind of led up to that, and walk us through, describe your life at that low point, and maybe if you could touch on some of what you believe in your research and your experience now that people can kind of look out for as warning signs.
Yeah, okay. So what my life looked like was that I went to work every day to an environment that was quite a negative place to be. So I inherited a lot of staff from my father. I didn't hire them, and many of the staff were really great. But there was one particular person who was very negative, and the bad apple is sort of the rotten egg that, and looking back as a leader, I should have really dismissed her. I should have just said, this is not going to work. But that toxicity, I kept trying to win her over and thinking eventually she'll see that I've got the vision that, this company needs, and eventually she'll understand where I'm coming from. And that was really a big mistake. I should have weeded out the rotten apple right at the core. So that was one of the big lessons. And then the nature of work was very stressful. So we were responsible for 80 million rand of other people's money every month. And that kind of pressure, looking after other people's revenue. So when the money came in, we were accountable for that, paying salaries of big organizations like City Power. So if you mess up badly, and there's quite important consequences. So I remember checking my phone like a maniac first thing in the morning, worrying about it, going to bed, if something went down, there was this whole sort of panic and phone calls and escalation and arguing with people. So that it was quite rough for a personality like mine. And in hindsight, I've learned that, I was really swimming against the current in terms of my own talents and strengths. So I'm an introvert, and I did most of my work was sales, trying to push the revenue and get more business. And I'm a creative person. Like, my brain is much more structured to strategy and forward thinking and big picture. And yet most of the other work I did was really about accounting and filling in forms and ticking little boxes. And so if you do that for a long period of time, you kind of swim against the current. You feel quite exhausted. You aren't really living your proper, what Carl Jung calls it, your natural lead function. So when you work with your talents and strengths, you feel energized, you feel great. But when you work against them relentlessly, that doesn't do you any good. And then, of course, I came home to young children in preschool. I had a 3 and a 6-year-old at the time. And you don't get much of a break. They follow you to the toilet and you can't really have a breather. As an introvert, I kind of needed that decompression time, considering the level of stress that was happening at work. And then the final aspect, I think, was that, also quite like an A-type personality. I didn't want to give up. And I was doing things like ultramarathon running, pushing my body to the extreme, hardly sleeping with this bad sleeper, one of my children. And so I'd wake up from this broken sleep and run 10Ks and then go into this negative environment and come home and have fighting kids and rush through the evening of bathing and feeding and brushing teeth and fall into bed and then do it again and do that for 5 years, So that repeated pattern was really pretty harmful for my health and well-being in general.
Yeah, as I would imagine for most people. So I guess, I think the context there is, is quite simple, really. It's that the demands of life are sometimes unmanageable, or they put us under pressure, which is the word you used, and we don't have the coping skills in order to effectively either harness stress or to manage our our energy. And if we don't do that, then obviously we hit this thing called burnout, and that's really not a great place to be. And when you're there, it's quite hard to kind of bounce back. And I think, broader conversation here is around the coronavirus. A lot of my listenership are business owners. I believe that if you have a business still, literally today, you should be grateful, because many entrepreneurs literally had the lights shut off because of this thing. I mean, travel businesses, events businesses, retail, it's and I had the guys from Howler on here, and they had a very successful event business, software business. And now I was thinking about them listening to you talk about their world and how quickly that whole world has shifted as well. And, they were looking at global expansion and all this kind of stuff. And I imagine a lot of those plans have now been shelved. My point is that, this is life. Life is one big struggle, and then you die. And so, and now we've got the coronavirus, and then we're in a recession. The recession started in Q4 of 2019, and, it's only going to accelerate, and once this coronavirus, disappears, and it will disappear at some point, and people need to have faith in that, that we're going to then be presented with a new set of problems, like the recovery phase from Corona, and what the economic impact is going to be. And so it never ever ends. You know what I mean? And so we have to have the right coping skills. We have to understand we have to understand what to look out for in terms of the warning signs around managing our energy, our mindset, and ultimately our capacity to adapt. Because if we don't do that, then that's when, we put ourselves in situations that aren't attainable, which is exactly what you described. It's what I described, what my kind of feelings were towards, like, I didn't want to be in the business. I kind of I fell out of love with it, and so I needed to it's like the universe is pushing back and going, you need to slow down. It was what it was doing to you, right? I imagine, in the sense that it was like you got ultra marathon and now you're doing I don't know how the hell you even were thinking about that, and then running a business. Like, no normal person can do that without having significant support systems in place and significant resources. And you didn't, and most of us don't. Most of us don't, and that's the truth. So I think maybe if we can, I think that's a good setup for some. Let's talk about coping mechanisms. So what is the premise of your two books? So Harnessing Stress and Managing Burnout. I think the titles are almost self-evident, but if you could just like peel the layer of the onion away for us and give us a little bit more context around, coping skills, why they matter, and we can get into the meat and the potatoes around that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the first one, Avoiding Burnout, it's in two parts. And the first part is really about my story of how I got there. So people can get a real feel of, these warning signs like you spoke about, and they start to see the disinterest and how, I fell out of love with the work. And I just felt like, this is not sustainable. So seeing that pattern and all the things that were contributing to my illness, I think can hopefully show people, aspects of their lives that they can resonate with. And then the second half of the book is really, the subtitle is The 7 Principles of Self-Preservation. So I'm quite a fairly analytical person. My job in IT was very much analytical. And I really dove deep into why this happened to me. I started to look at all aspects of my life and try to uncover all these little pockets that were wrong. So, the starting point is really principle 1, that is, it's basically know yourself. If you are an introvert, you shouldn't really be selling all day without a break. Obviously, every business owner needs to do a lot of self-promotion and pushing their brand and their business. But you also need other people to leverage that. You need to, have other things in place. And you also need to recover maybe from the social aspect if that's not really your natural way. So knowing yourself is pretty much primary. And I knew who I was, but I didn't align my work to that. So that was a huge lesson for me. And then some of the other principles are also around things like, if you're doing things out of obligation, start to live your own life, start to focus on your own dreams and put boundaries in place with people, get support structures in there, ask for help and be specific, Yeah, so that's kind of what the Avoiding Burnout is really for. It's these principles so that you can look at your life and say, oh, boy, I've got a really unhealthy relationship. I need to sort this out. Or, oh, I'm not following my passion. I have to try and embed aspects of my strengths into my work in some way to be able to thrive a little bit better.
What is the modern take on today now, in your view, on the idea of self-preservation? Because it's like, what does it mean? Like, if you were to categorically sum it up and qualify, what does it mean to, well, one, what is self-preservation, and then why does it matter now? Because if you think about, I'll talk about myself, right? Because I can't really talk about anybody else. So if I say to you, listen, why must I self-preserve myself when I'm responsible for 30 families? Because they come first. Do you understand? Or I could be a dad and I can go, well, I've got 2 kids at home, so they come first. So, in other words, like, do you understand? It's almost like it's quite a difficult thing to quantify. When should I self-preserve? And actually, when should I be selfish? Because I actually believe, like, you have to be selfish. You cannot, yes, you got to, of course, care about the 30 families. And of course, you got to put your kids first, but not all the time. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's an irrational model of the world to expect everything to be idealistic and fair. You understand?
Yeah. I think, the big lesson, one of the bigger lessons for me was about, this whole concept of you can't pour from an empty cup. And I kept my whole life, I think my childhood and everything sort of geared me up to be the kind of person who is just a giver. I'm a giver. If someone says, hey, can you help with this project? I was never going to say no. I was just that kind of person. Even in my corporate life, they'd throw another project on me and I didn't push back. I just said, oh yeah, okay, I'll find a way to do it, And there I was at 8 months pregnant, driving home from the CBD and in the dark and just crazy stuff when I look back now. I think the key thing is that it's not sustainable and it doesn't serve those who depend on you. So the fascinating thing about me then getting to that point, then I spent 3 years when I couldn't be the kind of person I wanted to be. And that means even like from a mother, I couldn't go to children's parties. I couldn't cook them a meal. There was so much that I couldn't do. And the 3-year-old doesn't understand. When you say you got chronic fatigue and it's going to take you 3 years to recover, they don't get that. They still ask you tomorrow, can you please play Lego on the floor with me? And it was really tough to be in the situation where I had to just say, there's so much I can't do. And that was tough for an A-type personality who can do everything, the superwoman type person. It was awful. And, I couldn't be the kind of wife I wanted to be. I couldn't support my friends. I couldn't go out. And I lost so much in my sport, the goals. So in order to serve your customers, your clients and your staff and all the community support that you offer in whatever service or offering you provide, and your family, you have to be pretty strong. And you cannot do that if you're continually putting everyone's needs above your own. There must be a little bit of a balance where you say, right now, I need to fill this cup because it's going to crack. And it's not pretty when it does. I've been there, and it's really not pretty.
Yeah, I haven't reached that stage, thank God, just yet. But I certainly got pretty close, and that was bad enough. I think one of the things to say there is that you said you couldn't be who you wanted to be. And that's quite a big statement, right? I think a lot of people can resonate with that. And it's one of the interesting things that I'm kind of going through at the moment is in my intimate relationships with family. So and even with my wife to an extent. And one of the things that that I'm kind of exploring in my own world around the idea of self-preservation is the role of expectations in your happiness, in the sense that, just take a marriage. You get a classical marriage and then you get a modern marriage. A classical marriage is, well, let's talk about, in the relationship context. So when you fall in love with someone, it's because you're meeting each other's needs entirely. Like everything you do is to meet her needs and vice versa, right? But then you get married, and you get married on the idea that, well, these needs will always be met, and this is why you're my soulmate, quote unquote, and then you get married, and like 10 years in, you started to realize that, well, the needs that were being met are no longer being met, and then that then reciprocates in many ways. And so what happens is then you wind up in a power struggle, right? So, well, you're not doing, no, you're doing this, and then suddenly now you're in trouble as a marriage. And it's because of the role of expectations in the dynamic of any relationship, whether you have that with your kids or your wife or your husband or your brother or your dad or your mom or whatever the case is. So like if you go back to the marriage example, it's like you have modern expectations. So, it's equality for the man and the husband and the wife, and they will all do things together, and financial income will be the same. You'll have sex 2.5 times a week, and it'll be equal with the kids, and that's the modern marriage now, right? So, but the old way is like, well, the man makes the money, and the mom must look after the kids primarily, and the dad, the patriarchy will make all the decisions, and they will lead. You understand? So if you do, but what happens is you're not consciously aware of the expectations that you carry. So you have to actually write them down, and so that you can become aware of them, because when you become aware of them, suddenly it's like, oh snap, that's actually what I expect, of a partner or of my kids or whatever the case is, or of a business partner even. And then what we also do is we don't recognize or take the time to ask ourselves, well, if I want this expectation to be met, what action am I prepared to take in order to get that thing? Because it's like we expect it to happen, but we're not prepared to do anything for it. So what we do is we walk around with this big bag of expectations that ultimately affect our happiness. They determine to what extent I should give, right? They determine the extent to which I believe I can be the person that I want to be or not, and so it's a powerful thing, but it all sits there. But the thing is, we lack this self-awareness. So I wanted to kind of get into the next kind of phase around coping skills is, how do we become self-aware of the things that we are missing, or the things that we need in order to kind of create a capacity to do more, or to give more, or to, you know, be happier, or whatever the case is. Where does one start? How do we become self-aware around you know, managing our energy and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I love that you spoke about expectations, because I do write about that in Harnessing Stress. I wrote about, you know, even in Avoiding Burnout, I spoke about these expectations I had of my husband, but I didn't express them. And you know, you get so resentful that this other person is not delivering to your expectations, but you've never actually said it out loud. And what was remarkable about that is that as soon as I expressed what I wanted to my husband, to say, I need you to take the kids out for 3 hours on a Saturday so that I can rest, I gave him finite, clear instructions. And the moment I did, of course, he accepted that and he did it. There's no question. But, you know, for maybe 8 years, I've been holding on to this, oh, he never does what I expect. The poor guy, there's no possibility of succeeding in a dynamic like that. So that really shifted for us. And I write about it in Harnessing Stress, saying you have to identify, you know, what do you need out of life? What do you actually want? And what do you expect of others in your personal relationships, in your business relationships? If you've got a staff member that you're getting all frustrated about, have you sat down and had this clear conversation to say, I expect XYZ of you, and what can I do to support you? And what do you expect of me in able to how to enable you? So those, having a lot of clarity around that really embeds that in a relationship and improves, you know, all kind of communication and the relationship as a whole. So that's really important. And I think boundaries. Yeah,
boundaries. Go ahead.
Boundaries are really important too. So I think the sicker I got, the worse my boundaries were, and they weren't that great to begin with as well. I felt like a complete doormat by the end of getting sick. And I think I was quite a people pleaser to start with. I didn't want to offend people. I was a conflict avoider, and I tried to make everybody happy all the time. And that's never going to happen. We've got to be realistic. That's also a personal expectation that I can just completely make everybody happy all the time. You got to drop that and realize that, well, actually making yourself happy is quite important. And there's some of the people are not going to accept the boundaries you put in place. And as I got well, you know, I started to get better and stronger. I started to push back a lot and say, well, actually, I can't do that now, or I'm not willing to do that, or I'm not ever going to do that. And there was a little bit of pushback, you know, and sort of shock when I started to put those boundaries in place originally. But then people accept it. You know, if they love you and they care for you and they're willing to, you know, give a little bit as well, then the relationship gets a whole lot stronger when you've been clear to say, this is the, you know, where it stops, the buck stops here, and that's not negotiable. Yeah. So that was really valuable for me to do as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think, just to echo again on this expectations thing, the more I think about it, it's like the amount of expectations that you carry are directly proportional to like the degree of your fulfillment and happiness almost. It's like, but it's like, even as CEO, I've got like 30 odd staff here, and you know, when I talk like with Maverick, just doing the show, for instance, or with Q-Dog, like I have expectations, but I've never actually voiced them up until a point where they drop balls, quote unquote. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But then even then, when they get the hairdryer treatment, you know, I'm not actually voicing the expectation. I'm actually just reacting to the fact that my expectations weren't met. So how can someone, you know, ever meet your expectations if you're not clear about them in the first place? Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And you might not actually be clear in your own head. I mean, I remember having these arguments with my husband. You talk about the marriage stuff, and we kept bandying about this term called your fair share. And I'm saying, I'm doing my fair share. You're not doing your fair share. And he's saying, but I'm doing my fair share. And then I said to him, well, what percentage of the household chores is your fair share? Like, what would you think? You know, that's all about. Is it 10%? And then I think we both had a bit of a light bulb moment, like, okay, it's not 50. He doesn't think his fair share is 50, you know, and we both sort of realized that for a moment. You use these same terms and you get stuck in these same conversations. But when you actually become really explicit to say, let's make a list of the 20 things that happen in this house, and let's see, or like what you can do extra that helps, or what you believe that is your role. Is mowing the lawn is not really going to be the kind of thing I want to do. To be realistic, as feminist as I want to be, I don't want to mow the lawn.
Yeah. Well, the thing also that came up this week is that, with the coronavirus, I've now got to manage, the same business, but without being able to see anyone. So you're not privy to certain conversations that happen in a department and things like this. And so it came up the grapevine yesterday that some people within the sort of creative it wasn't even the creative team, it was the intersection between creative and operations, and that there were some things said that maybe shouldn't have been said, and people are like overwhelmed, they're isolated, they're feeling, like they can't cope. And it's a tough situation to be in. It would be a lot easier if you could just tap them on the shoulder, hey, what's going on? Okay, cool. Okay, and then you can put it to bed. But now you don't have that. You don't really have. It's much harder to do that quickly. You can still do it, of course, but it's much harder to do that quickly. So
I think this time of isolation, we've got to be even more explicit about what we need, because we aren't in each other's company, and that social connection is lost a little bit. The relationship suffers just by the fact that we're not in the same room.
Well, and also the thing for me, it's culture. So I've got a great business idea, and I'm going to share it now. And I would really like someone to do this, because right now the entire world is working from home. Okay, and the biggest thing that made this business successful was its culture, right? And so now, how do you sustain a culture when people are in 30 different locations and you've got no way to interact with people? So I would pay somebody like a subscription of between 10 and 40,000 Rand a month if you could just do cultural activations for distributed workforces. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And helping people to manage the stress, because, we paid our staff early this week. And it was because of the announcement by Cyril, our president, and that's for my international listenership. He announced like 2 days ago that literally in 36 hours from now, they're going to lock down South Africa. Like, you're not going to be able to move, and like in many other countries. And so people are like panic buying and things like this. And it's like, well, I mean, it's the end of the month, and how am I going to pay for things? Even, you know what I'm saying? Like, even if I went to the shop, I wouldn't have money to pay for the things that I need in this panicked environment, in this very stressful environment. And I've got to do my work, and I'm a single mom, and I've got 4 single moms that work for me. And so we paid everybody early, and we announced it today, and the reaction was like heavily beyond. It was, and I didn't expect it to be as emotional as it was from the staff. And it's just a great barometer of how hectic it is for people who are feeling isolated, who have to deliver again, because are we getting busier, which is the irony, right? It's great, but it's just, we were lucky, we just picked the right category or the right market, but sector rather. But anyway, I wanted to get into like, how does one manage the stress between teams? In your experience, and I want you to wear the hat of a leader. So if you were in my situation, and there was friction between teams, and there was a disconnect, isolation, you got a very difficult, stressful environment outside of the business itself, and then inside, and how does one lead in that situation?
Yeah, I think as a leader, it's really important to show your own vulnerability, that you're also stressed, and you're also impacted by this, because sometimes people feel they don't want to show that they're buckling or struggling. So I think the compassion is really important, and the empathy to say, yes, we're all in this situation, we're all kind of struggling with that. But I think it's the same really as any kind of leadership struggle, whether we're in the same room or we're not. I think it's about allowing each person to have their voice and express their point of view, and connecting, trying to allow people to see where the other person's coming from. So what's really cool about the definition of stress, the stress researchers say stress happens when something we care about is at stake. So if you think about a conflict, and you think about how the differing opinions now, for some people, for coronavirus, what's at stake for one person is, I've got an elderly relative. For me, I've got a 94-year-old grandmother. I'm quite afraid that she's going to get ill. I want people to stay at home and not bring illness into her home, because she's very vulnerable. But then there's other people that are saying, well, actually, those nurses and those people need the income, and the economy needs to keep going. And what's at stake for them is something completely different. It's about the flow of money. And so when we understand what is at stake for each person and give them that voice to say, what is happening for you? What's underneath this conflict? Then we start to see things from each other's point of view, and we start to develop a little bit more empathy and compassion. And when we have that, then we often find that people are able to meet the other one halfway, or to try to find collaborative solutions to meet each other's needs. But when because I think what happens a lot of the time when we have this elevated stress, we become very polarized. You've got these camps of like, I'm the rebellious people that are saying, I'm just carrying on with my life and I'm not self-isolating. And the others on social media saying, why are people not staying at home? So people become very angry and very right about their point of view. But when we remember that some different things are at stake for different people, we can then start to work on solutions that really support each other.
Yeah.
So that would really be my, using stress as a definition would really be my take on it.
So that's quite interesting. And I want to kind of double down on the elevated stress situations, because it's like they say, you don't really know someone until you fight them. It's like, it's you know what I mean? Like, that's when true character comes out. Yeah, it's true, right? I got my team laughing here. Have you thought about that before? And it's true, right? Because you do behave differently when you are under stress. Is there a model or a framework that you've come across in your research, or maybe in your book, that describes the behavioral changes or the impact of elevated levels of stress on behavioral changes within the workplace? And again, just trying to look to understand, well, how does one manage these kinds of environments moving forward? Because this coronavirus story isn't going to go away for at least, I would say, 3 months to 6 months, even maybe longer.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, so I'm very interested in the the hormones that happen when we feel stress, and other things that happen. So the hormone of cortisol is one of the primary ones that's released when we experience stress. So when we have elevated cortisol, what actually happens is that we become more selfish, actually. and we're not as trustful. So we become mistrustful and selfish. And, that obviously has an evolutionary background. So, when we're in danger, we feel like, okay, I need to knuckle down and protect my loved ones and my own, well-being and my income. I can't be worried about other people and their stuff. I'm not going to do charity now. I'm really going to button down and look after myself and my own. And so when we have these elevated levels of cortisol in society now, that's what people are doing. They sort of, don't come to my house to endanger my family. I just want to block everyone out and protect myself. So it means we're less cooperative. We have lower levels of compassion for each other. But I think in trying to understand, the one benefit of this, one of the few positive sides we can see is that the coronavirus is really universal. It's one of these major world events that everybody is going to be impacted by, in maybe even different ways, but we're all affected and we're all fighting the same thing. So if we see it from you recognize people's common humanity by saying we're all in this together. If we can contribute and collaborate with each other, we can really ease each other's suffering instead of exacerbating it by being selfish and going to the stores and buying up every conceivable roll of toilet paper.
There was a funny article I read on BBC today, like all the sewage pipes are basically blocking up in the UK because people they can't use toilet paper, they have to use newspaper. So newspaper doesn't behave, you know what I'm saying, the way that it should. So it's becoming a thing where it's you know what I mean? But you just didn't have to panic buy. They were the world's sewage pipes would be fine, but you had to, you know what I mean? Now it's your fault. So that's what you're saying, right? Basically, right? Is that you became super selfish, you panicked, there was this ridiculous panic buying, because somehow coronavirus just makes you run to the loo for months.
Buy toilet paper.
You know what I mean? But this is a great example, right? It's about pressure, behavior change, and a negative consequence for it, because as you say, it does become selfish, and it kind of activates those negative values in all of us, right? So I wanted to kind of understand from you, how do we reconnect with each other then in a human to human, because and again, I keep saying this thing, but it's like we're not able to touch each other. We can't this team hugs each other, high fives each other in the morning. That was the environment. I didn't understand why you guys do it, but I know that you do it, and I'm cool with that. I just like to get one more hug, but that's fine. Go on then, go and hug each other. But we're not able to connect anymore, and actually we're kind of self-justifying to ourselves about why it's okay to be selfish. Well, I mean, it's me and my family, and and we come first, and what I'm saying, like, and in America they're buying guns.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like it's fucking insane. We've got the military, the SANDF, it's the National Defense Force deployed. I mean, like, it's all coming, right? And it's mass hysteria, mass pandemonium, and no one really knows where it's all gonna, the chips are gonna fall, right? So the big question then is, well, how do you reconnect with each other?
Yeah,
I know it seems like a very wishy-washy thing, but you're the stress expert. How do we do that?
But the science in this is really beautiful. I think so. Many people understand that the hormone of oxytocin, the love hormone, this is the one that is released when we have physical contact. So when we're intimate, when we have sex, and mother and child with breastfeeding, oxytocin from an evolutionary point of view really brings families together, communities, teams together. And even, when you see sports teams, patting each other on the back and doing the hugs and the high fives, that's also all the oxytocin is flooding through their systems. And why oxytocin is relevant for stress is that it actually brings down cortisol levels. And when you have more oxytocin flooding in your body, we raise things like serotonin, which makes us in a good mood and more, it opens us up to trust. We start to be more loving and courageous and supporting each other. So we actually need oxytocin to collaborate. And we get it from hugs and that. So now we're all sort of unable to get that rush of it. But my recommendation would be that it also comes in other ways. So you can get a flood of oxytocin if you have quite a meaningful conversation with other people. So, I mean, I noticed that now, I think it's just the circles I move in, but in the last 3 days, I've been invited to 3 separate Facebook communities that are about sharing love and sending out kindness and compassion. Like, how can we show acts of kindness in this time? How can we boost that? And so when you witness an act of kindness, you also get a flood of it. So it's almost overloading yourself on witnessing acts of kindness, trying to expose yourself to that. And what I've been doing in my own personal life, I'm reaching out to, my brothers are really, we don't connect very often in person, but I'm sending now WhatsApps to say, how are you holding up? Are you guys okay? Connecting with friends that live in other cities that I haven't seen in a while. I'm just trying to touch base with the people I care about to be able to lift my own oxytocin and theirs. So, when you have a meaningful chat to someone to say, gee, I'm so stressed. I had such a meltdown yesterday. I stayed in my pajamas all day. That kind of vulnerability, it does breed oxytocin. And of course, in the other 2 ways, so in my personal household, I've got 2 little girls and my husband. So I'm making sure I give them all lots of hugs so that we share that oxytocin, because the kids are also feeling, stressed at the time. And the final way is that our animals, so pets, when you stroke the fur of an animal, it releases oxytocin into your system. So if you sit with your cat on your lap and you pat them, or you have fun with your dog in the garden, you are getting a dose of it. And I think this is a time when the world needs lots of oxytocin. We need to flood our bodies full of it so that we can not buy every toilet roll in our vicinity and start to offer a bit of love and support to the people in our communities that need it.
Mm-hmm. And is there an injection you can take of oxytocin? What about a pill?
I think when the researchers do experiments on this, you sniff it, basically. There's a little vial.
Amazing.
And then people sniff it. So you can snort it, but I don't know where you would get it from.
But you can get it, is what you're saying. Does anyone have a dealer? Oxytocin dealer. We're pivoting, we're launching a pharmaceutical brand called Oxy Kung Fu.
King confused. There's a different kind of oxy, and it's not the same.
Is it not the same?
It's not the same.
That's hilarious. Well, but I don't know. What about other things that are more practical? So let's just say, like, Sanal here was
So
like,
not practical to hug your wife.
no, I was going to get to like the nuances here because, Sanal's like, yeah, but I don't have pets and I don't have kids and, so she lives in her, like she, as an example, she could live on her own and, she doesn't have, now she's literally, it's weird, right? If you think about it, it's like in the prisons, they put you in the hole if you step out of line. So you're on your own and now you're on your own and many people are literally on their own. Some obviously, are married, kids, or whatever the case is, but oftentimes you're on your own. So you don't have access to that kind of thing. I mean, are there other, like, what about meditation or something that you can do on your own and it doesn't require something else other than you and time? Walk us through what some of the options there could be.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of feeling good in that, so there's our autonomic nervous system has two main parts. So if you think about the sympathetic nervous system is like the accelerator. So if you imagine that when you push down that accelerator, you get that rev. And that's when we have a fight or flight response. We feel like, we're pumped and we're ready for action. On the other side, the other branch is the parasympathetic nervous system. And that is the one that calms us down. That's the brake to say, whoa, like slow down. Actually, life is not dangerous. We're actually okay and we can rest. And the way we stimulate that parasympathetic nervous system, there's a couple of ways we can do that. It's almost like a physiological hack that we can do that. And how we do that is by massaging the vagus nerve. It's called vagus, is from the Latin term wandering, because it actually goes from the skull through the larynx and voice box, heart and lungs, liver, spleen, reproductive organs, all the way down our torso. So it's really the longest set of nerves in the body. And there are a couple of ways that we can stimulate that. And in stimulating it, we calm ourselves down and we feel like we're coping. So the first way is exercise. So I think there's been some vague statements from the Minister of Health that's saying it shouldn't be a problem to go outside and exercise. So we're allowed to walk and run outside our gates, do something physical like that. If you don't want to leave your house, there's a lot of YouTube videos where you could do a yoga class or Pilates or whatever else physical things you can do that is possible. And that's stimulating that vagus nerve because your heart and lungs are connected, and that's getting you that kick of happiness. Everybody knows that exercise releases endorphins and you feel better. Meditation is another way. So when you meditate, you kind of calm down the whole nervous system and bring yourself into this beautiful state of calm. So that's a really good one. I just do things like a 10-minute video on YouTube because I find at the moment trying to empty my mind is just too much because there's a lot of chatter and worry about what's going on. So I'm finding if I listen to somebody else's instructions about, imagining a forest and that, it's easier than trying to just think about nothing because I'm really battling with that at the moment. And then, other things that are really cool I learned about is that if you vocalize, so of course, because the vagus nerve, it goes through our larynx, when you sing, chant, hum, or laugh, it really calms down the nervous system. So that's why, a lot of yoga classes start with chanting and humming. And when you might feel like if you've ever been to a church service, a funeral or something like that, and you sing along with everyone, you actually feel really good afterwards. And that's why you're getting that boost of that. And then the other one was, the physical touch and that we've spoken about already, the oxytocin boosts. Yeah, so those are kind of the tips and hacks that I can suggest from the research I've come across.
Cool. What's that scene with Matthew McConaughey in The Wolf of Wall Street? And he starts, he's like hitting his chest. I do that sometimes. I think that's quite cool. I like to think I'm the Wolf of Wall Street in my fantasy world. No? So now I was like, no, you're not. See, this is why I pay them. Tell me the truth.
The other one was the deep breathing. Yeah, that's also a really good one to do. So if you take a lot of deep breaths, you exercise also heart and lungs, and that really calms down the nervous system very quickly. So I forgot that one.
I know. Shame on you, damn it. But have you heard about the Wim Hof, the Hof method?
Nope.
What? Oh my God. I'm going to change your life right now. So that last point you made about the deep breathing, that's pretty much his thing. So So basically, it's a free app. I highly recommend that everybody go and download the thing. It's called the Wim Hof Method, and you download it. I'm actually going to get it up on my phone here now. And this guy's a Dutch dude. He's breaking all sorts of records for breathing in. Now it's asking me to sign. I'm not signing in again, but anyway. But basically, this guy's broken all sorts of records. He's climbed Mount Kilimanjaro or Mount Everest in his shorts. I'm serious.
Wow.
He's called the Iceman. He literally like lives in the cold. And so it's all about breathing. Because imagine if you jumped into like an ice bath right now, your breathing would be like like that. And so that's kind of where it started. But the idea is that you kind of control your breathing, and it's you take 30 to 40 breaths fully in and then slowly out. Not like slow out, but like you're breathing normally. You make it cyclical. But the idea is that you're pumping your body full of oxygen. It's charging up. And then what you do is you take one deep breath in, and then you hold your breath and you time it. And on the app, you've got a thing that you can time. And so if you think about like the average person, like Mav, how long could you hold your breath for like right now? How long? A minute. And then, Sanal, how about you? How long could you hold your breath for? Really? What about you? How long could you hold your breath for? Kathy?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, golly. I don't know. Probably a minute max.
Minute max. Yeah. So I get 3 minutes.
Wow.
Regularly, over 3 minutes, because of this breathing exercise. And the idea is that you can actually, so to your point, when your body's, let's just say, like we do CrossFit here, or we used to until this coronavirus bullshit. But basically, when you exercise, you'll know this through your training, you get lactic acid in your body. And also when you're stressed, your body produces acid. And so the idea is if you have a way to reduce the acid and literally transform your body through those two systems that you mentioned, from acidic to alkaline, you're able to one, auto boost your immune system, control the adrenal function, and like all these kind of things. They've done all sorts of tests on him. They actually injected him with this virus, like I shit you not, in Spain. They injected him with this virus, and they had injected, I think, 65 other patients and who exhibited the good health and this kind of stuff. And all of them were like puking and like just really went south, sweating, bullets, like really bad. He pitches up there, they inject him, and he's just doing his breathing, and nothing happens, like nothing. Yeah. Then they said to him, well, could you bring other people with? And because if it's replicable, then you know that you're onto something. And he brings like, whatever it was, like 20 people there, and they all inject them, and not one gets sick through this virus. And it's because we don't know what we can control around our health, actually, Yeah. So if you can do this Wim Hof method stuff, I highly recommend giving it a shot. It's truly mind blowing. So Kathy, I wanted to kind of wrap this up, but if you were to get into a time machine and go back to yourself when you were having this kind of breakdown. Or maybe even if you could go back to yourself when you were even younger, 21 years old or whatever, what advice would you give yourself about life in the context of harnessing stress, managing burnout? What advice would you give to yourself?
Well, I think the most important thing would be the balance of my needs with other people's. I think I got too far out of alignment with trying to please everybody else and lost sight completely of what I wanted and needed out of life. So if I could give myself the advice of making sure that life is actually going the way I want, and I'm getting to do work that I like, and I'm getting what I need out of life, I would have, if you have a balance in those scales, life would have ended up a whole lot easier, and I would have hopefully avoided what happened. So that would probably be it.
Okay. And why do you do all of this stuff? I mean, what is your hope? What is your highest motivation around, the work that you do?
Yeah, I think if I'd known what I know about stress before it happened, I think I would have been in a completely different state. I think I let stress engulf me so much, and I lost a tremendous amount through the experience. So it is really my quest in life to help others not have those losses. I know from post-traumatic growth that we all become better when we go through adversity, but I don't think everybody has to have 3 years of suffering and no income and no sport and things like that. I don't think everybody has to do that. I feel like I did that so that I can bring knowledge and experience to others to say, well, these are the ways, if you view stress in these ways and you learn about the amazing stress responses in the body and you harness it and galvanize yourself, and your own physiology, you almost start collaborating with your body instead of fighting it. I think that's really the big lesson that I bring to my clients, to try and move them to a place of appreciation for what their bodies are doing for them instead of fighting it and avoiding it and hiding from stress. That would be a summary of it, I guess. Yeah.
It's interesting that stress is necessary.
Oh, yeah. There's so many beautiful stress responses that help us do all sorts of things, learn from our mistakes, connect deeply with others, and meet deadlines. You've all felt that push, and that's a really specific stress response. It's highly beneficial for you, actually. Yeah.
Kathy, where can we find more information about you, your work that you do? Where can we go?
Okay, so my website is www.kathymann.coza with a K and 2 N's. So then my speaking is there, and then on Facebook I have a page, and I have a private group that educates people on how to learn how to switch their thinking in terms of moving to a positive way of stress. Mm-hmm. So those are my main channels, really.
Where can we get your book or your books?
Yeah, they are available on Amazon, both of them. Obviously at the moment in South Africa, it's easier to get a Kindle version, but they are in all the good bookstores in South Africa once we're online again, and in other nations, of course, in paperback or ebook version on Amazon.
Great stuff. Kathy Mann, thanks so much for your time. It's been great to chat to you.
Thanks so much. It was wonderful.
Much better. The audience grew.